Welcome to the SaaS AdLab podcast, where we interview the stories of SaaS founders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. My name is Luis. I'm the owner and founder of Fantôm Agency, a digital marketing agency specializing in scaling SaaS companies. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing John Oechsle. He is the CEO and president over at Swiftpage. Thank you so much for being on here today. It's a pleasure having you. And first off, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, kind of like where you grew up and how did you actually make it into the tech space?
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me, and look forward to having this. I think we're going to have a good time today, so we should have a blast. But wow, where did I grow up? I'm a New Jersey. I'm a Jersey boy. So I always tell everybody I'm an East Coast street punk with an education. I'm your worst nightmare. Yeah, I've been interested in computers all the way back. I'm an old man, so all the way back in the 70s and in the 80s, and I got a computer science degree, and just went on and started working at consulting firms and Fortune 50 companies, and made my way into running business units, and then ultimately running companies, and always been in the either information space or software space, etc. So that's kind of how I got there. Swiftpage is a really interesting story. Swiftpage was founded in 2001 by a really good friend of mine, Bob Ogden. Bob and I have known each other for 30 some odd years. And it was founded as a little small email marketing company. So think very similar to like a Constant Contact, a MailChimp, or something like that. So they all kind of came out around the same time. And somehow Bob convinced me back in 2003 to invest in his company. So I was an early investor in Swiftpage, and I put a round in, and then I put another round in I think '04. And by the time '06 came around, I put a third round in, and I said, Bobby, what are you doing with my money, buddy? I mean, we got to figure out what's going on.
Right.
So I came in and kind of helped from an advisory role standpoint, helped them with a strategy, and they really kind of started taking off, and the business really grew from '06 to 2010, when they were going to somebody was interested in acquiring them. And so my background is, as I talked about, I've been in all different kind of companies, but I'm very, very heavy into the M&A space. So I've grown companies from 200 million to 1.5 billion, et cetera, and a lot of that through acquisitive growth. So I kind of helped Bob form a board and navigated them through the acquisition, and unfortunately that kind of fell through, as sometimes deals do. And so the business kind of just ended up. So anyway, long story short, 2012. I stepped in. Bob asked me to kind of step in and take over as CEO. And I kind of say a funny story is that we were at a board meeting in January of 2012. I went to the restroom. I came back, and somehow I was the CEO of the company. So, and I said, guys, there has to be some kind of a bylaw that says if you go to the restroom, you can't be voted in as the CEO. But anyway, I was actually doing another gig where I was acquiring our largest competitor, so I had to finish that out. And I really took over in July of 2012. And we were still this little email marketing company. So what we did is we said, hey, listen, let's take a look at the SMB space, which is where we were really focused on. And we believe that the SMB space or industry or companies need 4 digital pillars in order to grow. We call them presence, traffic, conversion and retention, and optimization tools. And everybody knows what presence is, right? That's websites, landing pages, Facebook page, etc. And traffic, everybody knows what that is. Traffic drives traffic to that presence, and that creates leads. And then conversion and retention is all about converting those leads to customers, retaining them and growing them. And then optimization tools are things like finance software, HR software, etc. So we were kind of dabbling in this conversion and retention space with this little email marketing company. So our goal was, and our strategy, long-term business strategy was, we were going to own conversion and retention for the SMB. And we were so proud of ourselves that we came up with this great strategy, and like, et cetera. And, but then we stepped back and said, okay, how are we going to do that? Well, the first step is to really define what is conversion and retention, because it's not, a very well-known space. We define conversion retention as the culmination of a couple of big components. The number one component, or what we think is the center of the universe of conversion retention, is CRM. right? And if you have CRM, it houses all the existing or all the critical information you need in order to convert, retain, and grow, etc. So he said, okay, that's the anchor. And then there's other major pieces. There's marketing automation, there's sales automation, specifically CPQ, and then there's service management and field service management and things like that. Those make up the big components. If you have all of those in a single platform that is easy to use and intuitive, etc., well, then you're going to own the conversion and retention space for the SMB market. So that's our strategy. We laid that out in 2012, and then we just started to go like crazy to execute against that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a very good understanding too. Is like, digital marketing comes in and obviously like all that, but I guess I didn't really think that you'd be like so hands-on as it seems that, as what you just mentioned, like seems like it is the case, which is cool because you don't typically see like the CEO or someone in a very high executive position that typically understands everything that's kind of happening, as far as operationally and stuff like that goes more in depth. So it's nice to see that you have that kind of knowledge of the things that, are essential to not just your company, but also the SMBs that you're servicing. Now,
yeah. Oh, go ahead, please.
Where does then ACT come into the play?
So we had this great strategy, where CRM is the anchor, etc. And we were this little email marketing company. So I said, well, we're going to have to go out and acquire a CRM system. And of course, I was surrounded by all startup entrepreneur guys, and they were just like, no, we're going to build it. And I was like, no, we're not going to build it. We're going to buy it. All right. That's what I do. And so anyway, so we started looking around, and this is, about September of 2012. We came across, the ACT brand. We had already been working with the ACT brands from a technical partnership. We actually acquired both ACT and Sales Logics, 2 CRM systems from Sage in March of 2013. And we very quickly realized that Sales Logics was more enterprise focused. And so it was a great asset. We cleaned it up a little bit, and I divested that off to Infor in September of 2014. So that was a really good positive deal for us. But ACT really then became the anchor of our strategy. Now, ACT has been around forever, right? It's been around for 30 years. It was developed in 1987. It's been through a number of iterations and maturations and evolutions, etc. And so there was an enormous amount of positives that came with that acquisition. There was, obviously the ACT brand. Everybody knows that. And that was good. It was a global company, so it gave us a global footprint. Just to give you an idea of the transformational aspect of that acquisition, Swiftpage was 15 people. When we did the ACT and Sales Logics, we turned into a 350 Swifty organization in 4 locations around the world, right? Overnight, right? So it was just like, boom, a wild explosion. So it gave us that global footprint right away. It had a large, loyal, paying customer base, which was good, and it had a very large VAR channel. So those were kind of all the positives, and the functionality of the system was fantastic. It had all the functionality that SMB would ever want in their lifetime. Now, there's some challenges that came along with that acquisition as well, right? So we'll go back to the brand. Although everybody knew the brand was tired, right? So every time we said ACT, everybody would be like, wow, is that still around? Or, oh yeah, my father used to use that. Or the worst one was, oh yeah, my grandfather used to use that. Right? We're like, oh my God. So we had to do a lot of brand refresh, and kind of get that out of the ashes, if you would. The technology, although the functionality was fantastic, the technology was old. It was a closed desktop system. And nobody was really buying closed desktop systems anymore, right? And the business model was license and maintenance versus subscription. So we had a lot of work to do to really execute our strategy. So what I did is I took a step back and said, okay, we're going to take this company through 3 very distinct eras. We called them the transformation era, the conversion era, and then the growth era. So the transformation era was taking all those challenges that I just talked about and turning them around, right? We had to transform the technology from closed desktop system to open cloud enabled. We have to transform the business model from license and maintenance to subscription. We had to transform the brand. We had to transform all the back office systems. We had to retool the whole sales force, retool the channel. You could go on and on and on. It was a massive undertaking. And that really took us from March of 2013 till May of 2015. So a little over 2 years to kind of get through that transformational era. Now, while you're doing that, you still have to sell the software. You still have to sell the licenses, the desktop software, et cetera, to keep the business afloat while you're doing this. And then in May of 2015, we launched an entire new portfolio of products. It was cloud-based, it was subscription-based, and we launched that in North America. And then the next year, we launched it in the international market. So and that enabled us to go into the conversion era. So what's the conversion era? It's taking, 60 some odd thousand customers, 180 to 100 to 200,000 users, and start converting them over to, SaaS and subscription, et cetera. So think of 15, 16, and 17 as the conversion era. And we were very, very successful at doing that. The business completely turned around and was growing. We had recurring revenue, so everything was really good. And then we were poised to really go into the growth era. All right, so about mid-17, we started looking at what does that mean. And it really has two very distinct paths in the growth era. Number one is more geographic expansion. I mean, we are around the world, but really 6 countries make up most of our revenue. So there's great opportunity in Latin America. We haven't even scratched the surface too much in Asia. There's some non-ACT penetrated European countries, et cetera. So geographic expansion was, part of the growth era. But then the real part of the growth era was getting all the way back to our initial strategy was to do the acquisition, start getting the rest of the pieces of the puzzle to own conversion and retention. So I looked at the existing investor base that I had at that point. 62% of the company was still owned by the founder and friends and family. 38% was institutional. And I just said, that's not the investor makeup that's going to take us into the growth era. Right. So we went out and, basically strategically exited the business and recapitalized it, brought in a new set of investors, and that we did in May of 2018. Then we executed our first acquisition underneath the new ownership, and we brought in Kuvana or Inbox Guru, which is a marketing automation platform. So now we completely integrated that into the ACT platform. So now we have, the ACT, what we call ACT Growth Suite, which is an all-in-one CRM that has both CRM and marketing automation all in one platform. So we're moving pretty aggressively along that. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Huge. So there's like a lot of moving pieces, obviously, right? And one of the questions, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but one of the questions that came up in my head, you acquired ACT and you had to do a lot of changes to it, right? Like pretty much just rebuild the entire thing. So what is the benefit of doing that specifically, right? Like going after a company that's been out for a while, it's somewhat outdated. You have to rebuild stuff. Why not build that, just essentially build another, software from the ground up, and not have to acquire something that's already been out there?
Yeah, so when you do an acquisition, there's a couple of different things you look at. You could do just a pure technical acquisition where, you got somebody that has great technology, but they don't have any customers or whatever, and you can do that acquisition, and those are usually relatively cheap. And what they do is they get you to market a lot faster. Mm-hmm. But then you have to go find customers.
Customers, right.
So, when we looked at, getting a CRM, there were a lot, and there is a lot of small little players, great, little SaaS-based things that have built up or whatever, or we could have built it. It would have taken us probably about 2 years. The real benefit of doing what we did is that what came with that is 60,000 customers, 200,000 users, mm-hmm. Worldwide, footprint, and a VAR channel to come along with that. So all of that came with this. So it was better to bring that whole package in, take all the great functionality. So there was great functionality. You just had to tweak the infrastructure. You had to tweak the architecture. Layer in some new technology on top of that, and all of a sudden you have this phenomenally rich, CRM that has this big loyal customer base associated. So that's why we did that. Now you take a look at Inbox Guru and Kuvana when we acquired that marketing automation play. That was a pure tech play. All right, so that was great technology. They had just gotten started out. The technology was mature, but they only had a very, very small amount of customers.
Mm-hmm.
They were struggling to get customers. We had this massive customer base. It would have taken us forever to build that technology. With marriage made in heaven. You bring those two together. That's kind of how you evaluate, build, buy, what acquisitions to do, etc.
And acquisitions make sense, right? The thing that I guess kind of piqued my interest more was the fact that you acquired it, but then you pretty much had to do a lot of changes, which is, I guess typically you would want to avoid that. And that's one of the reasons why you'd be acquiring too, aside from the customers, obviously.
Right.
But that totally makes sense, especially if they have a very loyal user base. Now, another issue that I kind of see coming with that also is the fact that you have small businesses, right? Like, and typically you have people that don't necessarily change technology around and stuff like that. So they're very used to their own ways, and maybe even what's the right word? I guess they're kind of, I just blanked, but they like to do their things their own way. Yeah. So how does education come into play when you essentially switch out the technology that they've been used to for such a long time?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that transition then?
Yeah, so the number one thing that you do is you've got to make it frictionless, seamless, and it got to feel like they're coming along with the ride, and they're not making a massive change. And so what we did is we made sure that the interface and the experience that they were used to, even though it was on a desktop, was the same. And so it just happened to be whatever. And if somebody was on maintenance, we just automatically turned them on to subscription. So we did those types of things that we said, hey, listen, it's going to be very, very seamless. And we made the decision to continue to sell licenses while we were converting over. So if somebody said, no, I don't want to go right now, I just give me another seat, no problem. Boom, you got another seat, etc. And then you just keep on nurturing them and educating them all throughout the cycle of what's the benefits of coming over here versus staying here. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, you get, all the low-hanging fruit, and then you get the people that were kind of on the fence, and then you get the laggards, right? And those laggards, you have to create like pseudo events to say like, hey, this is not going to work anymore. You got to come over here, or if this, those type of things. And then you got to force them a little bit until you get to 90% or whatever, and then you say the last 10%, we love you, but you got to come over here. If you don't, sorry, type of thing. So it is a intimate conversation that you need to have, and we started having that conversation as early as September of 2013, where we were letting people know what the future is. Mm-hmm. And constant education, constantly either user groups or town hall meetings or emails or webinars, etc. And we did that for a solid 2 years. And so when it was the time to start happening, it wasn't something brand new, type of thing. So
very cool. Now, kind of shift gears here a little bit. When it comes to scaling and really scaling super fast, right? Like you went from, I think you said 15 employees over at Swiftpage to like 300 plus in different countries. How do you maintain culture at that level?
Yeah, so I mean, culture is absolutely super, super important, and we spent a lot of time on the culture of Swiftpage. We joke and we call ourselves Swifties or whatever, but it's a serious thing. It's like we're all part of what we call Swiftpage Nation. We're one team on one journey that makes up Swiftpage Nation. We're all Swifties, etc. And the first thing that we did is we defined the purpose of the company. Why do we exist? So why would every Swiftie wake up every morning and come to work? And it's very, very simple, and is that we fuel small business growth. That's it. And, a lot of companies will say like, oh, they'll call it a mission or this or that or whatever. And it'll be like 17 sentences sitting on the wall or whatever, and nobody reads it or whatever. Every Swiftie in Swiftpage Nation knows that we fuel small business growth. That's why we exist. And then it's like, okay, well, if that's why we exist, where are we going? What do we want to be when we grow up? That's the vision. And that is very simple as well. And we say that, the world will know us as the #1 small business solution again, right? So if you think about ACT was the #1 small business solution back in the late 80s, early 90s or whatever. And then lots of other players came around, and they kind of went, we're going to bring that back again. So that's the vision. And we're on this journey, the one team, one journey. And we have a compass. We call it living the exclamation. And that's going to guide us from our, purpose to our vision. We say living the exclamation. Why? Because ACT has an exclamation point.
Right.
And so, and those are just really simple statements. Some people call them values, but if you look at ours, like one of them is, work is fun with a purpose. We're here every day. We need to create an environment that, it's fun. We're working hard, but if you're not having fun while you're doing it, it becomes, tiresome while. Another one is it's okay to ask for help. And, so it's those simple English sentences or phrases that people can say like, okay, this is helping to guide us. And then we were in 4 locations. We're now down to 3 locations after we divested off Sales Logics. But if you go into any of the locations around the world, they look exactly the same. So this layout, the same color scheme, the same office furniture, the same, whatever. And, it's really about driving that culture. It's not different in Scottsdale than Denver and Newcastle, UK, or, et cetera. You got to layer that in, and then you got to live the culture. So you can't just say we have this great culture, but you got to live it. And what does that mean is like we created what we call the Culture Club. And if you're familiar with 80s songs, it's not sitting around singing Boy George songs. But the Culture Club is, people in each location that can connect together and say, what can we do on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or whatever to ensure that we're living the culture. There's events, we can do community service, we can have Tasty Tuesdays, we can do, all Swiftie meetings, we can do, et cetera. So it's really embedding the culture into every fiber of what you're doing. Now, having said all that, sounds great, and it's a great culture. It didn't happen overnight, right? So we had 3 companies that had to come together. You had little Swiftpage, you had a big behemoth of Sales Logics, and a big behemoth of ACT. And, you had to bring everybody together. And then, of course, we divested off Sales Logics. So then, the ACT team thought, well, we're getting divested off as well. And, so it took a good, solid, I would say 2 years to really embed the culture into the organization.
Very interesting, and I think I think you definitely said it right, where essentially you need to live the culture, not just say that you have one, because I feel like a lot of companies they'll say that they have like their mission statement and all these things, but when you go into the offices or you see them, like it doesn't seem like that's the case. So it's definitely good to make sure that it's not only being stated but also being executed essentially. And to shift gears a little bit more here, when it comes down to marketing and marketing specifically for SaaS companies, right? Obviously for ACT, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see? And this is on a personal level with ACT, and also that you see other SaaS companies doing.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge that we have that we all face, and that as companies that are trying to market to other small businesses, et cetera, it's really about how you have the conversation, right? So the conversation is dramatically changed. We all know that all the buyers and all the companies today are so much more informed, right? So don't talk to them about features. Don't talk to them about, that they've done all the homework or whatever. You or I could go on the internet and do all the research that we also need, and we're already probably 95% there as to what we want to purchase or what kind of relationship we want to have. And so now it's like, well, why do I want to have this relationship? So, what we're trying to do, and what we're telling our customers to do is have that conversation as to, what are the jobs to be done? What are you trying to do, and how can we help you do that? It's not about like, oh, we've got this really cool opportunity manager and you can move stuff around or whatever. That's a feature. It's
Right.
like, well, how does that matter to somebody who's like, well, I've got, I've lost 5 opportunities or whatever. So, okay, you need to go from understanding that I want leads to customers to raving fans. I mean, that's really, so, okay, that's what you're trying to do. And so let's have the conversation around how can we help you do that versus, hey, we got this great lead capture form that you can put on your website or those type of things. So what I always try and say, and what to the listeners of this is that really look at the tone of the conversation that you're having with your prospects and your customers. And is it the right tone? Is it helping them to understand what they can do versus are you just talking to them about a feature of a product?
So it really comes down to, empowering and educating and really being a solution regardless, of if they're going to be using your product or not, instead of really just talking about yourself and what you've built, the things that you have, and kind of switching over to how can you use this to become a better company yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. We use phrases like, did you know, or how do I, or how do you, right, etc. And it's very different. Like to an existing customer, we now have a very, very large customer base. Almost 90,000 customers, well over 300,000 users around the world. And so you have to have a very different conversation with them. They already know us. They already know, they have a relationship with us. They know our platform, etc. So now, that's really the did you know conversation. Did you know that your platform can help you do this? Did you know that you're probably having the same issues that all these customers or the people like you are having? And did you know this is how you can handle that? And then as new folks is they're kind of more looking like how do I do this or how do I do that? And so you got to have that how do I conversation with them. So did you know and how do I is probably the 2 ways to come about.
Use essentially to project. Very cool. Now to get a little bit more into a couple of personal questions here, since we're getting close to the time. What is something that you're not very good at?
Oh man, I'm not good at bowling. We had a little all Swifty thing. We went bowling, and I realized that I'm probably not a very good bowler. That's for sure.
Cool. If you had one piece of advice for anyone that's listening that they're currently either building a software company or they're currently trying to scale it, what would that be?
Yeah, so I get asked this a lot. I do a lot of speaking engagements, and my answer is pretty how I live my life and what I've done, and it's based around 3 words. It's courage, passion, and tenacity, right? And so you have to have the courage to continue on and do things that make you feel uncomfortable. And even if you take a look at a small little 15-person company acquiring 2 very large companies and exploding overnight, you have to have the courage to do that, because everybody was telling us there's no way you're going to do that. You're not going to be able to raise the capital. Nobody's going to back you, blah, 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 blah. And you just had to have the courage to drive through all that and make it happen. Right. And when you do that, you have to do it with passion, right? When you live your life with courage and you're doing everything on day, you can't come in and say, oh, today I'm just going to do that. You have to just say, no, I am passionate. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to drive through this. And people, that becomes infectious when people start seeing that passion, the courage and the passion. They're like, okay, I want to be part of this, etc. Now, not everything's going to go hunky dory. It's not all going to be rosy or whatever. And that's where tenacity comes in, because when it starts getting rough, it's really easy to give up. And if you don't have the tenacity to power through that, and the other tenacity is you have to have that tenacity to just always want to win. And if you lose, you got to hate it so bad, you're going to never want to do that again. And you got to keep on doing it. So courage, passion, and tenacity, or courage, tenacity, and passion, whatever you want to say. Those are the three words that, I live my life by. That's what all the Swifties drive. And, if you're a listener here and you're starting up your business or want to start up a business, man, use those three words and drive to where you want to be.
Great. Thank you for that advice. And what are some of the companies that you look up to in the SaaS space?
Well, you kind of look in our space. You have to watch what Salesforce is doing, right? You look at companies like Salesforce. You look at companies like HubSpot. I'll tell you, I really like a company, Zora. I don't know if you've seen those guys at all. They're a subscription management system, and so I think they're doing some really great things. So there's some really cool stuff that is going on. I think that, when I look at those companies, and a lot of them are enterprise focused, I'm just saying, like, okay, how can we take what they're doing and then small businessize it and make it easy for the small business to be able to absorb.
Very cool. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book, well, Malcolm Gladwell is my favorite author, right? And so, everyone from Tipping Point, but I would say that, the one, David and Goliath is the one I just finished. And I think that's, a really good one. Outliers is probably my favorite, from that standpoint.
Very cool. And where can people find you online, John?
John or J Oechsle at swiftpage.com is my email address. At HJOesch is my Twitter handle. H John Oechsle is my LinkedIn. I'm very active on Twitter, very active on LinkedIn, and I do answer all my emails. So connect with me. Go to act.com and check it out. You can go to swiftpage.com and you can find me there as well.
Very cool. And last question, do you have any questions for me?
Well, what can we do to help you? I think this is a fantastic, podcast. We have tons of small businesses that are our customers. Maybe we can help each other out. And if there's anything we can do, just let us know.
Definitely. You can definitely help out by sharing the podcast, subscribing if you want, if you like the content, obviously, and really just if you know anyone that should be on the podcast or you think that they could get some value from it, share with them. And if you have anyone that might want to be part of it, let me know or let them know, and then we'll get them on here. And thank you so much, John, for being on here. It was really a pleasure having you. I think you really dropped a lot of insightful information. A lot of people, whether they're starting out or whether they're like in the late stages of their company, they can take it away and start implementing, executing on it. So I think it was really good and really insightful again. So thank you so much for being on here today.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. I had a good time.
Thank you. Speak soon.